to A Call for Judgment. Today's show I want to cover, if you haven't heard this story about what's going on with the sun, well, at least what they're telling us is going on with the sun, is they're preparing us for some type of massive solar flare event. Some of the articles out there talking about unprecedented images which are revealing what's happening on the sun as it approaches what they're calling solar maximum. So for those of you out there, some of you might not believe it, you might believe it looking at the stuff that you see, the images. Obviously we know all the images they always reveal to us aren't real, but I look at all these stories and I say, well, what are they prepping us for? Because remember, if they can blame it on something else other than themselves, well, that's how this whole thing works perfectly for them, right? So an EMP, an electromagnetic pulse, is something that they've had planned for quite some time. An EMP would wipe out all technology. Now, you might listen and say, well, that's insane. Why would they ever wipe out tech? Well, they would wipe out tech and then bring in new tech. They would wipe out the power grid and force us into a green power grid. These are all things that they have planned. People are like, well, no one's going to give up, their power and get solar panels and do all this stuff willingly, right? Well, they're also not going to use force. So one of the things they can do with an EMP is destroy the power grid. One of the things they can do with an EMP is destroy your cell phone and other things, and then force you to get this type of technology inside of your body. This is something that they've had planned. So an EMP would be very, very hard for them to fake. But an EMP can be created by them. They just need an excuse. Now, most of us have looked at it and said, well, they could create some type of fake nuclear event, some type of bomb from Russia, and then say, well, the EMP from the effects of the bomb have wiped out the grid and wiped out, all technology, and now in order for people to have tech again, they would have to go to Big Brother, and Big Brother would provide it. So let me show you about, for those of you who are young or new to the channel, about what an EMP would possibly look like. And again, this is something that can happen from, quote unquote, a solar flare. And they're telling us that these images from the sun could lead to a potentially catastrophic solar flare event.
Newt Gingrich. Asked during the debate to name the security threats that worry him, Newt Gingrich lays out three scenarios: a weapon of mass destruction in an American city, a cyber attack, and something many have never heard of.
An electromagnetic pulse attack, which would literally destroy the country's capacity to function.
An electromagnetic pulse attack, or EMP. It's been the stuff of fiction on the Fox show 24.
It's an EMP!
But it's also a real threat, experts say, and it likely wouldn't look like that. An EMP attack, they say, is an intense burst of electromagnetic radiation. It can be triggered by detonating a nuclear weapon at high altitude, a weapon that could be launched by a rogue nation or a terrorist group with access to it. Detonated low to the ground, atomic weapons have a devastating physical shock. But detonated miles up in the atmosphere, experts say, the main impact is electrical. Energy that doesn't kill people, but spreads like lightning, striking any electrical grid or circuitry, feeding into them, burning them out. Whole cities could go dark. Security analyst James Carafano has written about EMP attacks.
In one single event, what could be disabled? If you had a large-scale EMP event in the United States, everything would be disabled, because even things that weren't knocked out, let's say your car, which might be okay, but the electrical grid's going to be gone. There's going to be no way to do traffic lights. There's going to be no way to land ships. There's no way to get fuel to the gas stations to refuel your car. And if you got there, the gas pumps wouldn't work.
Think of this fictional attack in the movie Ocean's 11. We demonstrated electromagnetic interference on a much smaller, less threatening scale at the University of Maryland, showing how magnetic fields from some electronic devices often interfere with other devices.
You hear this ringing behind me? We're showing you what electromagnetic interference is. Say this television is a car. Car's function is rolling along normally. Here's a cell phone ringing. When it gets close to that, you can see how the audio of the television signal changes. Hear the interference. That's essentially interfering with the car's function.
But with a large-scale EMP attack, experts say, computers would fail, telecommunications cut off, bank accounts inaccessible. They say that's because the transformers that power many electrical grids take a long time to manufacture and transport. And with transportation knocked out by the attack, that prolongs the isolation.
So that's what something like this would look like. And again, people have a tough time wrapping their head around it because they say, well, they would never want us off our phones. They would never want us off our tech. But the truth of the matter is, to reset things, and get people back on the type of technology they want them on, which would be a fully controlled technology. Technically, to me, I would believe it would be a type of technology, a cell phone that's inside your body, because they could say, look, this could never happen again. You won't have to worry about losing your data, right? They could do things with the EMP that would wipe out your bank accounts. Oh my gosh, the whole grid went down and came back on. Nobody had money in their bank. There are so many endless things that they can make up with a solar flare. And again, if the grid goes down for an extended period of time, so let's just say hypothetically the grid was down for 3 months or 6 months, people will lose their minds. Okay, not only will people run out of food, which they want to cause chaos on the surface here, right? People running out of food, people robbing and looting, trying to find food, and of course, who will end up having food? Who will end up helping, giving out a helping hand? Big Brother will, right? And this will lead more people to Big Brother. This will lead people to be under more control of Big Brother, because they'll, of course, tell people, look, if you want food and you want water from us, then you need to follow our protocols and our orders. That's why it's so important for all of us to have food sources saved, water sources saved, and have everything that you possibly could need for a long-term effect of the grid going down. And remember, shutting down the grid works perfectly for them from the standpoint of bringing the grid back and bringing back the type of grid that they want to bring back, which is a green grid, right? If the whole grid goes down and they were going to bring a new grid in, then even the Republicans would be like, all right, I guess we could do a green energy grid now that all the grid is destroyed. We have all the technology and everything ready to bring in a solar panel, and of course, this would be a limited amount of energy that we would all have, and this would be completely controlled. This would give them control over your thermostat. It would give them control over your electricity. They'd have the ability to shut your electricity off and your thermostat off at will, which, I mean, technically, can you say that they do now? I mean, you could, I guess, technically say they could just shut your grid off if they feel like it, but they need an excuse to do these things. They can't just do it. They can't just make it suspicious. They can't get people going after them. So they can use events like solar flares, or at least tell us that there's going to be a massive solar flare, to give them an opportunity to completely wipe tech off and use a potential EMP type of thing that they would create, an electromagnetic pulse that they could potentially create. But again, it would shut the grid off. It would destroy all technology, which means your phones wouldn't work, which would cause absolute chaos. Okay, that's one of the things people are like, I don't think they'd ever do that even for a temporary period of time because they want people on their phone. Well, they want people to go insane too. They want chaos. What would cause more chaos than millennials out there not being able to get on their phone for 5 minutes? Because we've seen, obviously, if you go out in public, that most of these people can't be off their phone for 5 seconds, let alone 5 weeks, let alone 5 months. Okay, you would have chaos. People would not know how to act. Most people don't even know how to interact with other human beings this day and age. They only know how to interact on their phone and text and an avatar. They don't know how to go to a bar or a store or anywhere and interact with other people. That's obviously something that they've conditioned them into. So what they're trying to say is, I'll read to you what they're talking about here with the solar flare, is that new images, and by the way, I'm recording this, this is probably going up June 1st. They're talking about there being a potential one on June 2nd. Now, I'm not saying that there's going to be one on June 2nd. I highly doubt it. But they are saying that a scary solar storm is to strike the Earth on June 2nd. But again, I mean, this is coming out of their mouths. So you can't really believe anything they say, but just keep an eye on that as well on June 2nd. So new images of the sun's surface captured by a powerful ground-based solar telescope have revealed sunspots and other features in unprecedented.
With Spot Me, I can overdraft up to $200 fee-free.
Install the chat app today.
Agenda.
Movies and TV.
Solar telescope have revealed sunspots and other features in unprecedented detail. The 8 images released on May 19th were taken using National Science Foundation's Daniel K. Solar Telescope, located on the island of Maui in Hawaii, although the sun is becoming increasingly active as the July 2025 solar maximum, the peak of the sun's 11-year cycle, draws closer. The photos showcase the quieter aspects of the solar system. So they're showing these sunspots and things like that, which obviously all look like bogus images anyway, which is pretty much anything that they release to us are fake images. But the narrative of this is what's important to keep an eye on. This July 2025 solar maximum, the peak of the sun's 11-year cycle, because it gives them an out. It gives them a way when they start planning this type of stuff and saying, well, what are we supposed to do? It's the sun. It's nature. This happened, that happened. For them to get away with creating events on this surface, on the Earth, creating any type of electromagnetic pulse, creating anything that they want to create. And that's what they really do these stories for. They reveal these things and tell us these things so that there's already something planted in your head where you're like, oh, well, the grid's down for 6 months because of the solar flare. And then if they hear people like me and you, and we're like, wait a minute, our own government is created this propaganda so that they could create an EMP, so that they could shut down the grid and reset everything and cause starvation and cause mass chaos and force people into FEMA camps in order to eat and have water. But nobody would ever believe it. They'd say we're still conspiracy theorists. And you might say, well, I think that people would actually believe it. They'd be suspicious. Yeah, well, they weren't suspicious after the last event that occurred. And most of us have been warning about it for a decade because the predictive programming was in place. And all of these people like Bill Gates, et cetera, were telling us that it was coming and it was going to happen. And we all obviously knew that they wanted to get a certain something in everybody's body. So, all that stuff was there. And after it happened, what were we told? Oh, we're told we're all crazy conspiracy theorists. And even to this day, they still tell us that we are, even though we are 100% correct and everything we said is correct and continue to be correct about it. So in this type of event, obviously, they're telling people that we're going to hit solar maximum. So by telling us we're going to hit solar maximum, they're pretty much already telling you that something is going to occur. Something is going to occur.
Stuff in advance.
It's not just going to be some type of heat wave. It's going to be some type of electromagnetic pulse. So cool, dark sunspots dot the photosphere or the sun's surface where the magnetic field is strong, and they can be the size of the Earth or larger. Clusters of sunspots are the cause of solar flares and coronal mass ejections when plasma and part of the magnetic field pinch off from the sun's outer atmosphere, or corona. I love the terminology, right? Nothing suspicious about it. And go streaming across the solar system. These energetic outbursts from the sun can impact Earth's satellite-based communications. The sunspot regions shown in the images are study in contrast. Bright, hot plasma flows upward on the sun's surface, while darker, cooler plasma flows down, blah, blah, blah. Fine detailed structures include glowing dots that exist where the magnetic field is the strongest. Bright strands derived from the magnetic field can transport heat and surround the sunspot. So they go on and on and on. And then they start talking about potential solar flares. They talk about 2025, that this is going to get so hot that it's going to reach maximum potential. Well, what would happen when it reaches maximum potential, right? I mean, what? It's just going to suddenly go away, right? And then there's articles out there saying worst solar storm of the century, destroyed power grids. Can it strike again in 2023? They say in 1989, the solar storm struck the Earth that was so powerful it caused a 9-hour-long power outage and sparked a massive radio blackout. And then they go on to, program people about that and tell people about that. So people are like, oh my goodness, okay, so I guess that can happen. So if we do have a solar flare, we can expect to lose power or lose it'll be the radios, everything will be off because an EMP would wipe out everything. So the seed planting is in place for solar flares, right? And the seed planting is also in place for something with Russia. So that would mean on either side that the EMP seed is in place. A grid shutdown is in place. A grid shutdown would cause utter chaos. People, again, they feel like they're not going to shut the grid down because they think, oh, they want technology. They don't want people to shut off their tech and not be able to go on tech. Yes, they do. Yes, they do, because part of a great reset, an EMP would give them that. Because when the grid came back on, say months later, your bank accounts would be wiped out. Everything would be gone. An EMP would wipe out all data. It's like putting, it's pretty much just like sledgehammering your computer. You're not going to get what you have on there and then lighting it on fire. You're not going to be able to get it back. Right? With an EMP, it would wipe everything out. It would be like a clean slate. And then it would give them, the ability to come out and say, hey, look, we're going with a green energy grid now that the whole energy system is shut down. They'll tell us that it's EMP proof, even though technically an EMP would wipe out solar panels. Obviously, there's things like EMP shields and things like that, to block those types of surges. But in reality, they'll come out and they'll tell us that it would never happen again if we go green and we have all this stuff in place. And everyone will have no choice but to go along with it. And that's really, an EMP is a perfect way for them to have this type of a great reset that they want. When you hear about the Great Reset, people are just like, oh, they're planning a Great Reset. As if like we're all going to wake up tomorrow and all our bank accounts are going to be at zero. They need something to use as a scapegoat. They can't just do it. Otherwise, people are suspicious. Otherwise, people fight back, push back, and say, you know what, the government has failed us. The government's not working for us. The government's working against us. But when they can blame it on the boogeyman, whether it's a solar flare, whether it's Russia, whether it's the boogeyman in Afghanistan, we always hear of a boogeyman because the boogeyman's always the scapegoat so that they can get away with the stuff that they put in place here, like the Patriot Act, right? Oh, well, we have to have the Patriot Act. We have to give away our privacy because it's for the betterment of of protecting us from the boogeyman, right? So everybody was just like, oh, okay, right. Next thing you know, we see what the NSA and all these government agencies are doing to its civilians, and they really obviously just spying on us and are doing nothing to protect us. They're just trying to go after anyone that speaks against the communist government that's now in place. So again, this is something you can expect down the line, EMP. I'm not saying it's happening today. I'm not saying it's happening tomorrow, but look for the programming, look for the messaging. And they're putting messaging out there about a 2025 potential massive solar maximum, which would create, quote unquote, a massive solar flare, that would wipe out all technologies on the earth. And again, to reset everything, they need to shut it all off first. That's my take, at least. I thank everyone for being here. Hope you're doing well. God bless you and your families.